Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Nami moved to Rouge Town, and met silly Luffy, and fell in love with him movie. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic Crackerjack000, subscribe if you enjoy the video. Let's begin the story. Here we go again. The orange-haired 16-year-old girl thought, as she gazed out the car window, as they drove down the street. She sat upright, and sighed, as she looked up at the top of the car. "Oh, Nami," her mother said, looking behind her seat at her, "it's not going to be that bad." "Yes it is, for the 1000th time you're ripping me apart from my friends just because you once again got a better job offer somewhere else." Nami crossed her arms, and pouted. "Just think of it as a new adventure," her dad said, as he drove the car down another street. "That's what you say every single time," Nami complained. "Just try to live through it one more time, please Nami. This time we might actually stay." Nami's mother tried to calm Nami down. Whatever, Nami rolled her eyes, and continued to gaze out the window. As the car entered Nami's new hometown, the car came to a red light, and stopped. As the car stopped, Nami was still looking out the window, and got a chance to look into one of the nearby coffee shops. In the coffee shop she saw a boy, about her age, sitting at one of the tables with his friends. She poked her head out the window to get a closer look. He had black hair, with the goofiest straw hat on. Nami had to laugh. I mean, who wears straw hats anymore? Then she saw him take off his hat, and set it down next to him. Nami was amazed. Without his straw hat on, well, what could she say? He was hot. Then, Nami shrieked, as the light turned green, and the car continued to drive off with Nami hanging out the window. "For goodness sake, Nami, keep your body parts inside the car," her mother screamed at her, as Nami sat back down in her seat. "Sorry," Nami apologized. "What were you looking at anyways?" her father questioned. Nami sighed. When they finally reached their new home, the car stopped in the driveway, and Nami lazily pulled herself out of the car, and stretched her legs. Finally, after a boat ride through the ocean, and a long car drive, "We're here," Nami's mother exclaimed. Nami sighed, and started to help bring in all the luggage that was in the car, as they waited for the storage car to arrive with all their furniture. When everything was there, and they had picked out rooms, and put all the furniture wherever desired, Nami unpacked all her luggage with her clothes and personal items, and put them away in her room. She collapsed on her bed in her new room, and took a deep breath before sitting herself up to examine her room. Her mom knocked on the door, and Nami let her in. "You've got 1 week of summer vacation left," Nami's mother told me. "I suggest you get out of the house for a while, and explore your surroundings." Nami shrugged. "Sure, whatever." Then Nami passed her mom on the way out of her room, walked down the stairs, and out of the house. "That girl's got such an attitude," her mother huffed, as she watched Nami leave the house. As Nami stepped outside, she looked around her, and sighed again. She hated moving so much. It was a nightmare. The same thing would happen every time. She would get used to everything, and make new friends, then at the absolute worst moment ever they'd move again. She decided to take a walk down her street. She examined her neighbors' houses as she passed them. She looked into one window, and saw a family playing a board game together, and then she looked into another, and saw a group of teens listening to music. She sighed at the thought of friends. Just as Nami thought she was totally alone, she felt somebody approaching her from behind. She jumped in shock, as she felt something tap her shoulder. "Oh, I'm sorry for surprising you," a girl offered Nami a hand after she fell down from shock. "No problem," Nami assured, as she took the girl's hand, and got up to her feet. "Who are you?" Nami asked. "I'm Vivi," the girl said. Nami examined her, and she looked at her age. "I'm Nami." Nami smiled. "Did you just move in at that house?" Vivi asked, pointing behind her at Nami's new home. Nami nodded. "Yeah." Vivi got excited, and smiled wide. "You're my new neighbor." "Oh really?" Nami questioned. "Yup, I'm so happy. You're the first girl to move here on my street. I mean, I still see Robin at school, but this is awesome," Vivi exclaimed. Nami rolled her eyes. "I probably will move by the end of the year though." "Why is that?" Vivi asked. "It's my mom's job. We've been moving all over the place for years," Nami complained. "Well, that's okay. You'll have an amazing time here, I promise." Vivi grabbed Nami's hand, and ran her down a few streets to the main shopping area. "Look at this. This is a Rouge Town shopping district." Vivi pointed into the shopping district. "Rouge Town?" Nami questioned. "Is that the name of where I live now?" Vivi nodded. There were people everywhere. There was even a guy on the roof of one of the shopping buildings. It was the most people Nami had ever seen in her life. "Whoa," Nami whispered to herself. "Cool, huh?" Vivi smiled at her. "Yeah, it's great," Nami said, clapping her hands. "Mega shopping, here I come." Vivi crossed her arms. "I don't think any of us can afford to buy anything, but food here. Everything's so expensive." "Not for me," Nami said, showing Vivi her wallet. "My parents are rich, and give me money all the time." "Why do they give you so much money?" Vivi asked. "They think if they give me money all the time I'll forgive them for dragging me all over the place," Nami huffed. placing her wallet back in her pocket. "Oh," Vivi said quietly. Nami waved her hands in front of her face. "Don't worry about it. That's my problem. Now, I saw a neat coffee shop on the way here. I wonder where it is." "What do you mean by neat?" Vivi questioned. "Well," Nami started, "it's not really a coffee shop. I'm interested in the guy I saw inside of it." Vivi raised an eyebrow. "What did he look like?" "He had black hair, and this straw hat. But without his hat on he looks really cute," Nami said. Vivi started laughing hysterically. "I know who you're talking about. That's your other neighbor, Luffy. I can't believe you like him." "What's wrong with him?" Nami asked, putting her hands on her hips. "He's the goofiest person I know." Vivi laughed harder. "Could I meet him?" Nami asked. "Sure, and while you're at it we can meet the rest of my friends too," Vivi told. "He's your friend?" Nami questioned. "Well, duh. He's one of my neighbors." Vivi laughed at her. "Oh yeah?" Nami laughed too, as she scratched the back of her head. "Well, let's go to that coffee shop," Vivi said, running off into the crowd. Nami followed her. "Hey, wait up. I wonder what he's like," Nami thought to herself, as they reached the coffee shop, and she saw him, as they walked in, and she met his gaze. As Nami and Luffy's eyes met, he got up, and started walking slowly over to her. Vivi elbowed her softly, and said, "Here he comes." Then she winked, and ran off out the doors again. "Wait, Vivi, come back," Nami pleaded, waving her arm trying to get her friend's attention, as she ran away, and disappeared into the large crowd. "Hey, what's your name?" she heard a boy ask from behind her. She turned around and blushed. "What?" Luffy was the boy behind her. She had forgotten about him for that short moment. "Your name?" Luffy asked again, laughing a little at her bewildered expression. "Oh, sorry. My name's Nami. Yours?" Nami said. "My name is Luffy." "It's nice to meet you," Luffy grinned. "It's nice to meet you too," Nami said while holding out her hand, and smiling. Luffy looked confused. "You're supposed to take my hand and shake it," Nami told him, a bit confused as to why he was acting so strange. "You want me to hold your hand?" Luffy exclaimed. No, that is not what Nami said," but soon was interrupted by another boy. "Luffy, you shake hands with someone when you first meet them," the boy behind Luffy said, putting his hand on Luffy's shoulder, and laughing. "I knew that," Luffy defended himself. "Here, Luffy, like this," he said, walking up to Nami, and holding out his hand. "Hi, my name is Zolo. It's nice to meet you." Nami took his hand, and played along. "My name is Nami. Nice to meet you too. I'm a friend of Luffy's. Don't mind Smarty over there. He can be a little slow at times, but don't worry, he's not mental or anything." Zolo pointed behind him at Luffy. "I can shake hands," Luffy huffed, pushing Zolo out of the way, and grabbing Nami's hand. As he slowly stopped shaking her hand, he didn't let go. He for some reason didn't want to. He liked the extra warmth. Nami looked down at their hands, and backed up at Luffy. Why isn't he letting go, she thought, but really, she didn't want to let go either. "You guys can let go now, you know." Zolo crossed his arms, and smirked. Luffy quickly released her hand, and blushed. He had no idea what just happened in that moment of time. Not a clue. "Well, it was nice meeting you, new neighbor. Bye." And with that, Nami ran out the doors, as fast as she could, back to her house. Luffy scratched the back of his head, and raised one of his eyebrows at her actions. "Confused again?" Zolo laughed. "Kinda, I don't know. What just happened? Why didn't I want to let go of her hand?" Luffy felt completely lost. Zolo only laughed harder. "I see sparks flying," Zolo teased. "Shut up." Luffy shook his fist. He's never had to deal with girls like this, and he didn't feel like starting. "Calm down, I'm only joking." Zolo waved his hands around. "Wait," Luffy thought for a second. "What is it now?" Zolo asked his clueless friend. She said neighbor. "That means I live next to her," he said softly. "Is that a bad thing?" Zolo crossed his arms again. "No. Or, I don't think." Luffy scratched his head. "Don't think too hard now. Your brain might break." Zolo laughed. "Quit it," Luffy said before marching off. "Tell Sanji. And Usopp I went home." "What's wrong with him today?" Zolo asked himself. He shrugged. "Not my problem." As Nami arrived at her house, she stopped from all the running, and sat down in her lawn to rest. "Nami, it's getting dark. Please come for dinner," her mom yelled from the front door. Nami opened her eyes to the darkening sky, and smiled. Every night she would sit on her roof and gaze at the stars. It was a perfect way to sort out her thoughts and feelings. She stood up, and headed in her house. But before she stepped inside, she looked behind her, and saw that same Luffy running up the street. She quickly stepped inside her house, and slammed the door shut behind her. She leaned against the closed door, and blushed at the thought of him. "Nami, how long does it take you to get to the darn dining room?" she heard her mother yell from the other side of her house. "Coming, Mom," Nami shouted back, as she ran down the hall, and into the dining room, where she sat down at the table, and enjoyed dinner. As soon as she was done, she ran up the stairs, into her room, then opened her window, and peeked her head out the window. Just as she thought, The stars were already all out in the nighttime sky, and they were beautiful. She couldn't wait to get on top of her roof and watch them all in their shining glory. But then she turned her head towards Luffy's house. He was looking out his window too, but he was looking straight at her. "Eep," Nami squeaked, as she quickly stopped looking out the window, and shut it after she pulled her head back in the room. She put her hand to her chest, and felt her heartbeat speed up. That was scary, she thought. Then she decided to open the window, and look back out again, but this time, he wasn't there. She shook her head, and returned back to reality. It was time to go stargazing. She put on her light jacket, and quietly slipped out her window, and climbed on top of her house to the roof. She took a deep breath of the sweet nighttime air, and sighed pleasantly. She smiled, and sat down on the highest part of her roof, and looked up at all the magnificent stars. They seemed to shine so brightly, and they were so beautiful Nami couldn't help but smile. Then she remembered earlier this morning, and lifted the hand Luffy had held in front of her face. As she looked at her hand in wonder, she thought to herself, what happened this morning was so weird, and ultra confusing. How will I face him again? I can't help it, I'm confused. She put down her hand, and looked back at the stars. She searched for the biggest star she could find, and closed her eyes. I wished to get to know Luffy better. She opened her eyes and sighed. Hey! Nami jumped at the sound of someone behind her, and nearly fell off the house. But the boy behind her caught her. It was Luffy again. You gotta be more careful, Luffy laughed. Nami freed herself from him, and sat herself back down. What are you doing on my roof? She demanded to know. Well, Luffy started, I just saw you here stargazing too, so I thought I'd join you. You stargaze too? Nami questioned him, as he sat down next to her. Yeah, I stargaze every night, Luffy admitted. Nami looked down, and blushed. Me too. Will you let me stargaze with you? Luffy asked. Nami nodded her head slowly. Yeah, sure. So, what do you think about when you stargaze? Luffy asked her, as he laid down, and looked up at the sky, and the stars. Nami thought to herself, then answered, a lot of stuff. Well, actually, everything. Cool, me too. So much happens every day, I just need some time to myself to think, you know? Luffy told. That's exactly how I feel, Nami whispered. So we're not so different then, are we? Luffy looked up at her. Nami looked down at him. Yeah, I guess so. Nami blushed. She noticed he wasn't wearing his hat again. She looked away, and blushed even deeper. Bad Nami, evil thoughts, she thought to herself, but she couldn't help it. He is cute with his hat off. Something wrong? Luffy asked her. Oh, no, it's nothing, Nami assured him, looking back down at him. Luffy sat up, and scooted closer to her, and looked her deep in the eye. You sure? He asked. Nami blushed deeper, as she also looked deep into his eyes. Nami couldn't answer. She totally drifted off into space. Luffy was the same. He only felt himself getting closer, and closer to her face. She could only feel the sweet warmness of his breath. But then she remembered she had never had her first kiss before. Wait, she thought, oh, he's about to kiss me. Luffy, Nami said, getting his attention back to reality. He snapped back, and realized how close to her face he was. I gotta go in now. Sorry, Nami said before climbing back through her window, and into her room. As Nami took off her shoes, and her light jacket, she laid down in her bed, and stared at her ceiling. He could have taken my first kiss, she thought to herself. He almost kissed me. I'm so going to lose sleep over this, she whispered to herself. A week passed, and it was time to start school the next day. Nami's mother shouted from the hallway outside of her room. Hurry up packing. Okay, we're all going to check out your school dorm today. Nami moaned. She was truly annoyed. She just got to her new so-called home, and here she was repacking everything, but her furniture, because she had to live at her school. It was practically like moving, but on the bright side, no more mom and dad. But more bad news was that she'd have to live with a total stranger, unless somehow Vivi would be her new roommate. Nami, her mother repeated from the hallway, tapping her foot, as if to show how annoyed she was. I know, I'm hurrying, as fast as I can go, Nami huffed back. Well, Nami's mother started. We're all waiting in the car, and with that her mother walked down the hallway, down the stairs, and out the door to the car. What a pest, Nami insulted while packing up the last of her personal belongings and clothes. As soon as she was done, she put her backpack on, and put her suitcases in each hand, and headed off to the car where her parents were waiting for her. She threw all her stuff in the seat next to her, and sat down, shutting the car door behind her, and the car drove off. Took you long enough, her father pointed out. I would have been faster if I didn't have to carry all my stuff, Nami muttered back. Your fault for bringing so much crap you don't even need, his father snapped back. Nami sighed. Maybe moving away from her parents for a year is just what she needs. Hey, yeah, that sounded great. But Nami just sighed. Her parents could at least be a little nice on the last day. Just a little wouldn't kill them. A while later, but what seemed like hours, they reached Nami's new school, and parked in one of the many open parking spaces. Nami looked out her window, and examined her surroundings. As soon as the car stopped in the parking space, Nami's door flew open, and she hopped out of the car to get a better look at what she'd be living with for a year. Nami had to admit, it was really nice, and it was huge. There were even a couple of fountains, and lots of benches, and trees all over the place. It looked really beautiful, and pleasant. What the hell, she really would like it here. It looked so peaceful, and calm. It'd probably still look nice even when crowded before, and after school. Nami slipped back inside the car, and only grabbed her backpack, seeing as her dad had already taken her other luggage for her. She put her backpack on her back, and looked around once again, before following her parents to the school's office. Once there, her parents checked her in, and gave Nami a slip of paper which told her everything she would need to know, her locker number, which dorm she was in, and what the room number was, all her classes, her lunch number, etc. Nami sighed when she looked at her paper though. It told her everything, but the one thing she really wanted to know, who her roommate was. "What's wrong, Nami?" her mother asked, as they searched for Nami's dorm building. Nami looked up at her mom, and smiled. "Oh, it's nothing you need to worry about. Just thinking, that's all." Nami's mother raised an eyebrow at her. "Okay, but don't think too hard." Nami rolled her eyes at her mom, and continued in her thoughts. "I wonder if Nana started thinking, does Luffy go to this school too? I wonder what he's doing right now. Maybe we can go stargazing together again." Then Nami remembered it, and Luffy almost kissed her. Nami blushed deeply, and held her hand up to her mouth. Her father noticed her actions and sighed. "What's wrong with you?" Nami's mother asked her husband. "We've only been here a week, and Nami's already involved with boys." Nami looked over at her daughter, and grinned, picking at her playfully. "Oh, is that so?" "Shut up." Nami huffed at her mom, and scowled at her dad for even bringing the subject up. He seemed to like messing with her. Her father only smirked. He knew her mother couldn't resist the topic when it came to Nami's private life. She had to know everything. "Who is it this time, huh?" Nami's mother asked, begging for an answer. "It's nobody." Nami told me to get angrier and angrier. She had to thank the sweet Lord for not letting anyone be around to hear. "I know you're hiding it." "Who is this boy?" her mother repeated. As her mother continued to poke at Nami, they reached the dorm, and soon were inside. Nami's father set everything down in front of the hallway, and turned around to Nami. "I think you can find your dorm room, and unpack yourself. It shouldn't be a problem moving in one day early," her father informed her. Nami clenched her fists. He was acting as if he didn't care that he wouldn't see his only daughter leave for a year. "Did anyone want her?" "What your father's trying to say is," Nami's mother said, pushing her father aside, "we think it'd be good for you if you got used to everything before you had to start school." "I understand," Nami lied. Her mother's words still didn't convince her that she was wanted at all. "Well, goodbye," her mother said cheerfully, then hugged her, dragging Nami's father into it so it was one big group hug. So with that they left, and Nami watched them leave until they disappeared out the door. Nami shrugged everything off, and picked up all her luggage, and heeled them to the room that read room number 28. She slowly opened the door, and nobody was there. She guessed she'd just have to wait till the next day to see her roommate. All that was in the blank room was 2 beds, 2 dressers, and a normal-sized TV that looked pretty old. A good thing though was that she got one of the rooms with its own bathroom. She could hear Vivi saying it now, "Lucky." She spent the next hour unpacking everything, and neatly placing it on her side of the room. Since she was first, she picked the side next to the window. Again, she could hear the words, "Lucky." She stood up, and examined her work. It just kinda looked like her room. Just not as messy. She tended to be a messy person, she couldn't help it. As she walked out the door, she remembered she got one of the boys and girls' dorms. She sighed. She didn't want to live with guys. Her father was enough. But before she left down the hall, she heard something in the door next to her. She softly and quietly put her ear to the door, and listened carefully, but heard nothing. All of a sudden the door opened, sending Nami into such a shock that she fell to the ground, and crawled backwards halfway down the hall. She squeezed her eyes shut, and covered her head. "Oh, hi," she heard a familiar voice say. "Nami, I didn't see you there." She put her arms down, and out of her face to see who it was. She looked up, and Luffy was hovering over her, smiling, and holding out his hand to her, asking, "Need help up?" Nami nervously nodded, and took his hand, and quickly let go, as soon as she was on her feet again. Luffy smiled. "You should be more careful." "I can see why her name isn't Grace." Luffy unknowingly insulted. "What?" Nami blurted out, obviously pissed. Was this the same Luffy she was with that one night? Luffy looked at her weird. "What did I do?" he asked stupidly. Nami shook her head, and stormed off back to her room, and slammed the door shut behind her. That couldn't have been Luffy. Not that same Luffy who almost kissed her. Nami sighed. That was mean. I don't think a guy like Luffy would insult me, or any other girl for that matter. Maybe he's just mad at me for leaving right before he kissed me. Nami closed her eyes, and began thinking harder. Well, if she thinks I'm going to give up my first kiss to someone I just met, he can think again, Nami announced to herself in her head. She walked over to her bed, and laid down while staring at the ceiling, but still. Meanwhile, Luffy was still in the hallway, as confused as ever. He was just joking around. He quickly went to his room, and pinned a piece of paper on his wall next to his bed that was titled Girl Notes. He grabbed a pen, and began writing, Note 1. Try not to joke with girls. After writing that, he seemed satisfied, and stuffed the pen in his right pocket. Then, he too laid down in his bed, and stared at the ceiling, deep in thought. Why do I feel different around Nami than I do with Vivi, and Robin, and all the other girls I know? Luffy really didn't seem interested in girls before he met Nami. He continued to think to himself, well, she definitely cuter than the other girls, and seems smarter, not that I really care. But then again, Vivi's just as cute as Nami, and Vivi has no strange effect on me, so what is it? Luffy shook his head back to reality. Whatever it was, he could figure it out tomorrow. It's a good thing Zolo's his roommate. He's got girls chasing him to the ends of the earth, metaphorically of course, but Luffy couldn't help falling asleep still thinking about her. He couldn't get her out of his mind. Something about her just took his breath away somehow. It was hard to explain. The next morning was for the most part a quiet one, since everybody was just supposed to find their dorms and unpack. School started tomorrow. Nami got up at her usual time, and did what she normally does every morning, brush her teeth, get dressed, brush her hair, etc. The day before, Nami was informed by her new principal that her new roommate wasn't supposed to be at her dorm till later that night, so Nami's wait continued. As soon as Nami was done getting ready for the day, she figured she'd just walk around campus for a while, seeing as there was nothing else to do. She slipped on her shoes, and grabbed one of her bags with her wallet in it, just in case she decided to leave campus for a while, and check out some of the shops, and opened her door, and shut it behind her. As she walked out of her room, she stopped herself before she headed down the hallway, and out of her dorm building to examine Luffy's door, which was right next to hers. She could hear his snoring from inside. It was pretty bad. She felt sorry for whoever had to share a room with him. Then she remembered last night. Maybe I was a little too mean last night, Nami thought to herself, frowning. After a while of just listening to his snoring, she just shrugged, and walked down the hall, down the stairs, and out of the dorm building. Nami was glad she had a room on the second floor. It took less time to get out of the building. She finally decided it would be a good idea just to walk through the park for a while. It was so peaceful in the morning. Almost nobody was there, so it was like Nami got the whole park to herself. She was glad the park wasn't too far from her dorm building. The park, like her new school, was huge, and it was well taken care of too. The grass was green, the trees looked healthy, and everything was clean. On the farthest away part of the park was a cute little pond with a bunch of cherry blossom trees, and on the side of the park closest to her dorm building was a couple of fountains, and somewhere in the middle was a really big fountain, and benches were placed almost everywhere. It looked really nice. Nami walked over to the large fountain in the middle of the park, and sat on the ledge of the fountain. She set her bag down next to her, and examined her surroundings. She couldn't stop admiring the park's beauty. After a while of sitting there, she got a little bored, and grabbed her bag, and got up again. She looked around the park. Where to next, she thought. Before she decided where she wanted to go, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around to see another girl about her age. She had beautiful black hair, and looked like a smart person. The girl stopped in front of Nami, and smiled. Hi, you must be Nami. Nami had a confused expression on her face. How do you know my name? Nami questioned. The girl laughed a little. Vivi couldn't stop talking about you. Oh, Nami thought for a moment before talking again. You must be Robin? Yeah. Did Vivi mention me? Robin asked, still smiling. Once, right after I left my house, she started talking to me, and mentioned you once, I think. Nami informed Robin. So what have you been up to this morning? Robin continued to question. I just thought I'd look around for a while. By the way, where's Vivi at? Nami asked. She's still at her house. She won't be here till later tonight, Robin told me. Oh, Nami sighed. She was looking forward to hanging out with Vivi. Do you have a roommate yet? Robin asked. No, whoever's my roommate won't be here till later tonight also, Nami replied. Maybe your new roommate's Vivi. Robin smiled her cheery smile. I hope so. Nami got a little excited. Do you know who's in the room next to you? Robin asked. Yeah, Luffy, Nami said. Are you happy about that? Robin asked again. I guess you could say that, but I think I might have been mean to him last night. What? Robin asked, confused. What happened? Oh, it's nothing, Nami smiled. Well, I'd better get going now. I've got stuff I still need to do. Bye. And with that, Robin left, and Nami waved goodbye. Robin seemed like a cool person. although she asked way too many questions. Nami finally decided she'd go rest for a while next to the pond in the middle of the cherry blossom trees. When she got there, she sat down next to the pond and leaned against one of the cherry blossom trees after she set her bag down. She liked the way the petals softly fell to the ground, making a beautiful scenery. It was very relaxing, so Nami felt as though she were about to fall asleep. She slowly shut her eyes and slowly began to fall asleep until something woke her up. "Nami!" She heard a boy shout from a distance. She ignored it and tried to continue to sleep, but the same sound repeating made her open her eyes to see Luffy running at her. He stopped in front of her and smiled. "Hey," he greeted. "Oh, hi," Nami said softly. He had his hat off again, and the cherry blossom petals falling in the background made him look even cuter as he smiled his adorable smile. Nami blushed furiously while looking at him. He just continued to smile. Nami decided she should apologize for last night, but was beaten to it by Luffy. "I'm sorry about last night. I didn't mean to offend you," Luffy apologized. "I should be sorry. I shouldn't have snapped like that." Nami apologized back. "Nah, it's okay. I should think about what I'm saying." Luffy smiled again. For once, Luffy was acting the slightest bit smart, and Nami smiled at the fact. Maybe he wasn't such an annoying person at all. At times, he seemed really sweet and cute. His happy attitude was contagious too. Maybe she would like to hang out with him all year. Luffy sat down next to her. "It's really nice over here, huh?" "It's beautiful," Nami said. Luffy looked at her and smiled. To him, she was part of the scenery. Her beautiful smile seemed to light up the whole place, and her skin seemed so soft he had to admit. She must have been one of the most beautiful people he'd ever met in his life. Nami looked at him confused. "What?" Luffy snapped back to reality, and looked away blushing. "Nothing's wrong." Nami raised an eyebrow at him. "Okay, whatever." Well, Luffy started getting up again. "I told Zolo I'd meet up with him today." "Is he your roommate?" Nami questioned. "Yeah, I got lucky again this year. We were roommates last year too," Luffy explained. "Oh, I see," Nami said. "Well, I'll talk to you later. And maybe sometime I can introduce you to some of my other friends too." Luffy smiled. "Okay, sounds fun." Nami smiled back. "Bye," Luffy said before running off. "Bye." Nami waved goodbye as he ran off. Alone again, Nami thought, what now? Finally, about sometime around 5 p.m., Nami headed back to the dorm building to wait for her new roommate. She set her bag on the table next to her bed with her alarm clock on it, and laid back in her bed thinking a little bit. "I hope I see Luffy tomorrow at school. Maybe he'll let me sit with him and his friends. I've already met Zolo. He's a pretty cool person." After a while, Nami felt herself wanting to see Luffy again more and more every minute. He was so nice, and when she thought about it, the times he was acting stupid seemed kinda funny. Although it was easy for Luffy to get on Nami's nerves, for the most part he really didn't. Nami sat up and looked at the wall separating his room from hers. If he was there, she could just go see him, but she found herself getting shy and having to think about it. When she finally decided it wouldn't hurt to go see him, she got up and headed to the door. But before she could reach for the door knob, the door opened up, revealing her new roommate. It was Vivi. Vivi dropped all her stuff and gave Nami a big hug. "Hello, roommate," Vivi laughed and greeted before letting go of her. "Yay," Nami cheered. Nami got out of Vivi's way for a short moment so Vivi could get all her stuff in. Nami helped her unpack, which took until 9 p.m., because Vivi was overpacked. "Why'd you bring so much stuff?" Nami asked her friend. "Because I wanted to," Vivi answered simply. Nami rolled her eyes, but was still glad Vivi was her roommate. Nami felt lucky she wouldn't have to have her new roommate be a total stranger. The end of that day soon passed, and before Nami knew it, her alarm was telling her it was time to get up for school. She lazily dragged herself out of bed, and found Vivi was already gone. She yawned, and stretched her arms and legs before getting into her new school uniform. A simple white shirt, black skirt, black tie, black knee socks, and black dress shoes. Before leaving for school, she brushed her teeth and brushed her hair in the bathroom. She picked up her bag with all her school supplies and books in it, and shut the door behind her. "I didn't know Vivi would get up this early," Nami thought to herself, as she strolled out of the dorm building and down the sidewalk. The thought of school starting at 7:30 a.m. bugged Nami. Who gets up that early? Nami shrugged. She could worry about it later, and she was already up anyway. The real problem she had to face today was school. She moaned quietly to herself. School. This was her first year going to a private school. Her parents didn't have enough money before to send her, so she had no idea what it was like. Was private school going to be too strict, too harsh? She sighed. The real question she found that she was asking herself was, how much drama will there be this year? What's going to happen? How long is this time till my parents decide it's time to run away and move again? She looked down at her feet as she continued to walk to school. She didn't really want to know the answers to her questions. To Luffy. Luffy woke up late, as usual. Despite all the energy he seemed to have all through the day, He just really didn't like mornings. Day after day it was the same thing. He got up late, around 7 a.m., and ended up only having a half an hour to get ready for school and leave. Hardly enough time, so he made it work somehow. After getting dressed and brushing his teeth hair, he slipped out the door and headed off to school. Of course, he didn't even have to think about him. Solo was already at school. Solo was the type to get up earlier than he had to. It was just him. Luffy absolutely didn't like school. He hated learning, but every once in a while, school didn't bother him. It meant seeing his friends, and, as usual, getting away with sleeping in the class. And now he had another face he could look forward to seeing every day. Nami. He smiled. The image of her pretty smile made him happy. The sound of her laugh made him laugh. The sound of her voice relaxed. It was like nothing he felt for Robin or Vivi or any other girl he knew. The more he thought about her, the more he couldn't wait to see her at school. He started walking faster and faster to school. He just couldn't wait. As he hastily walked to school, he thought of the places he might find her. The cafeteria, the classrooms, the commons, the PE field desk. Then he saw her, and he felt his heart all of a sudden jump, and the closer he got to her, the faster his heart beat. When she felt someone behind her, she turned around and saw him. It was as if his heart chopped and jumped into his throat. He couldn't say a word. "Oh, hey Luffy," Nami smiled and walked closer to him. Luffy stopped and stood there. All he managed to get out was, hey. You don't like getting up early either, huh?" Nami laughed, stopping in front of him with her hands holding her bag behind her back. And no, Luffy laughed awkwardly. Her sudden presence scared him a little, and on top of that, he was getting nervous just being around her. He was confused. She never fazed him before. Nami waved a hand in front of his blank face. "Hello, are you still there?" she asked. Luffy snapped back to reality and blinked. "Oh, sorry." He scratched the back of his head and laughed awkwardly again. Nami raised an eyebrow at him and gave him a weird smile. Well, bye then." Then she turned around and continued to walk to school, but before she got far, she felt something stop her and tug on her arm. She looked over her shoulder to see Luffy, still standing behind her, pulling on her arm to stop her. "What?" she questioned, waiting a while for his reply. He looked away from her and blushed a light shade of pink and cleared his throat. "Did you think we could walk to school together?" he managed to ask. Nami smiled warmly at him. "Sure." Luffy's eyes lit up, and he looked at her shocked. "Really?" he asked. "Why not?" Nami laughed, trying to ignore his strange, out of the normal behavior. He softly let go of her wrist and walked to school beside her. As they got closer and closer to school, she felt her wrist. She missed the warmth Luffy gave it already. She sighed quietly. She thought it was stupid to start liking someone with the large possibility that she'd move sometime again within the next 12 months. Luffy noticed her sigh and bent down a little so he'd be looking up at her face. "Are you okay?" he asked. Nami smiled at him. "It's okay, I'm fine," she assured him. Luffy smiled sweetly back at her. "Alright." Nami pulled out her school schedule and showed it to Luffy. He looked at her bewildered. "What?" Nami laughed quietly. "Do we have any of the same classes together?" Luffy took the slip of paper from her hand and took out his. He examined them closely, looking back and forth from his to hers. After a while, Nami looked over his shoulder. "It looked like we had first period math together, third period English, and lunch." Luffy handed back her slip of paper and smiled. "That's cool." Nami took her schedule and slipped it back into her handbag. As soon as they reached the school, Nami was greeted by Vivi and Robin. They ran up to Luffy and her and waved. Vivi nudged Nami in the shoulder. "Walking to school with Luffy, Vivi whispered jokingly. "Shut up," Nami whispered back. "Mind if we steal her from you?" Robin asked Luffy. Luffy blushed. "Gee, go ahead. I told my other friends I'd meet them in the morning anyway." Then with that he took off. You chased him away," Nami pouted. "Well, that was the plan," Vivi laughed. Robin put her hands on her hips. "I see you have a thing for him, yes?" Nami blushed a deep shade of red. "And no, it's not like that. He's my friend too." "Sure he is," Vivi laughed harder. "Let's just get to class." Nami started. School started in 5 minutes. Nami hastily headed down one of the school's halls with Vivi searching for her first period class. Math, room number 54. Since Vivi went to the same school every year, she knew exactly where to go, so Nami just followed. "Aha!" Vivi cheered and pointed to the room she stopped in front of. Nami sighed in relief that they made it in time and slipped into the room after Vivi. As she stepped into the classroom, she examined the room closely. Math charts plastered the walls, math tools were neatly placed all over the room, and the chalkboard was blank. Then she noticed everyone was already in their seats and waiting for class to start when Vivi, and she just arrived. "Ah, Vivi, just on time. You were almost late. I see you didn't change at all over the summer." Her teacher sighed for a moment, then continued, Same old Vivi, always arriving at the last possible moment. Vivi laughed awkwardly, and scratched the back of her head. Heh, sorry. The teacher's gaze moved from Vivi to Nami, who was standing next to her. And who is this? Oh, Vivi looked at Nami, and smiled. This is... Before Vivi could finish, Nami interrupted by introducing herself. I'm Nami. I just moved here. Pleased to meet you, the teacher said before looking back at Vivi. You can take your seats now. With that said, and over, Vivi and Nami took the 2 seats up front, the only 2 seats left. As the teacher nodded, picked up a piece of chalk, and started writing fractions on the chalkboard, it hit Nami in the back of the head. She hated math, and wasn't good at it either. She sighed, and lowered her head. In her past schools, she'd sit in the very back of the room, and get away with sleeping through class. But here she was, all the way in the front of the class, having to listen to her teacher go on, and on, and on. Then she thought to herself for a while. Class neared end. Luffy had her first period class. She smiled to herself, and looked behind her at her other classmates, but he wasn't there. She sighed again, and continued to look at her teacher's scribble on the chalkboard, until a note was softly and quietly set on her desk from the seat next to hers. But the note wasn't from Vivi. She raised an eyebrow at it, then shrugged. It couldn't hurt to read it while the teacher continued to face the board, and nod at her. The note was folded very messily, and the handwriting on the front that said to Nami wasn't very neat either. But, as long as she could read it, it didn't really matter. She unfolded the note slowly, and read what it said, while making sure the teacher wouldn't see it. Hey, look next to you. Nami folded the note back up, and slid it under her desk before taking a deep breath, and looking next to her. There he was, smiling his goofy smile, and waving. It was Luffy, and he was sitting next to her. Nami blushed, and looked back the other way. She wasn't expecting him to be right next to her. Then she felt guilty for not noticing him before. Why didn't she notice him there before? She didn't have a clue. But her thoughts didn't change. He was still there. She sighed deeply, and then looked back in his direction. He was still smiling at her cheerfully, so she smiled back. She thought it was kinda cute when he smiled. He always seemed happy. First period math ended quickly after that, and before Nami knew it, second and third was over too, and it was time for lunch. Before Nami headed to the lunchroom to meet up with Vivi and Robin, she stopped by her locker to put all her books away. She opened her locker, and neatly placed her books in, then shut her locker again. Hey, wait up! She heard a familiar voice shout from behind her. She looked over her shoulder, as she stopped walking in the middle of the empty hallway, and she saw Zolo running at her. Oh, it's just you. Nami sighed in relief. She thought it might have been her English teacher. She wasn't exactly friends with her new English teacher. Nami's best subject was English, and when she pointed out one of her English teacher's mistakes while she was teaching, the whole class laughed, and her English teacher was furious. Why are you all alone? I'd expect a pretty face like you to have at least made a few friends by now. He laughed, irritating Nami for the most part. Shut up, she said coldly, and then continued walking down the hall to the lunchroom. I didn't mean it that way. Zolo caught up with her just in time, as they entered the lunchroom. Where's Luffy? Nami asked, looking up at him. Why'd he have to be so darn tall? Oh, that's right, he's looking for you, Zolo informed me. Great, Nami though, he's looking for me. I think I'll just eat outside. If you see him, tell him I'm just outside the school. And then, she walked off, and disappeared down the hall. Zolo scratched the back of his head, and sighed, sure, whatever. As Nami walked outside, she breathed in the fresh air, and sat down on the closest bench. She opened her packed lunch, and began eating, as she gazed off into space. She had a lot on her mind, like how she was going to survive school all year, what Vivi was going to do to her for not eating lunch with them, her next classes, what she wanted to do when school was over, and of course him. She thought about his goofy smile, his laugh, the sound of his voice, and the effect it had on her. She packed up what was left of her lunch, and just sat there for a while, letting the thought of him flood her mind. Lunch wasn't over for another 30 minutes, so she had a little more time to relax. Just when she thought she was completely alone, she felt someone tap her on the shoulder, and sit next to her. She didn't even need to open her eyes because she already knew who it was, Luffy. It was strange, whenever she thought about him, he was always there. I looked everywhere for you, Luffy exclaimed. I remember you saying we had the same lunch, but when I looked in the lunchroom you weren't there. Sorry, Nami sighed, I just needed some fresh air. That's alright. Luffy leaned back on the bench. Zolo told me where you were. Luffy, Nami looked at him. Why'd you want to find me so badly? There was a pause before Luffy answered, and then he looked at her, and smiled. I miss your smile. Nami looked the other direction, and blushed furious. She wasn't expecting that kind of an answer. When Luffy finally realized what he had said, he tried to correct himself. Oh, I mean I wanted to introduce you to my friends. Okay, Nami mumbled, still looking away from him, and blushing madly. Do you want to hang out with me and my friends after school? Luffy asked. Sounds like a good idea, Nami smiled. You sure? He questioned. Yup. Really? Uh-huh. You mean it? Of course. You'll really come? Nami found herself getting very irritated. Why'd he have to repeat the same question over and over again when she had already said yes? Nami? He waited a bit longer, unknowing that Nami's anger was building up by the second. Nami? He repeated. Nami turned to him harshly and shot a glare. I said I'd go. She yelled harshly, then stood up. Now if you don't mind, I think I'll go prepare for my next class. Bye. And with that she turned away from him and walked back into the school. Luffy sat there for a long 5 minutes, totally bewildered, before he realized what just happened. He sighed deeply. Once again he made Nami mad at him. He quickly took out a pen from his pocket and quickly began writing a note on his hand. Never ask a girl too many questions. Then he shoved the pen back in his pocket and walked lazily back into the school, unaware that Zolo was following behind him. That was smooth, he joked sarcastically. No, that was weird, Luffy corrected him. Better luck next time, Zolo laughed. The rest of the school day went by fast. Before Nami knew it, the last bell rang, and she was on her way back to the dorm building. Vivi had planned on going back into town with Robin, and Nami refused to go. She just wanted to think for a while, by herself, but it was no use. Before long he was calling her name again. Nami! Luffy hollered from behind her. Nami sighed and faced him as he stopped in front of her and took a minute to catch his breath. Where are you going? Luffy asked, smiling at her with that same old cheesy smile. Back to my dorm. Where else would I go? Nami raised an eyebrow at him. I thought I was going to introduce you to my friends after school, Luffy told, laughing a little. Oh yeah, Nami sighed to herself. I tried to forget. Nami tried to smile weakly at him. Where are they? This way, Luffy cheered and grabbed her wrist as he took off in the direction of the PE field. It was so hard to keep up with him. If he wasn't holding onto her wrist, she'd be left in the dust. He was really fast. Almost there. He laughed more and ran faster. He was basically dragging her now. She couldn't even feel her feet touching the ground. Slow down, Nami groaned, trying to stop and free herself from his grip. But it was no use. He didn't even hear her. She repeated herself, but he continued to not hear her. Luffy, she shrieked. Luffy then stopped and looked back at her. What? He asked, a little confused at her sudden outburst. Nami took a second to breath and then answered, slow down a bit. We're already here. Luffy smiled and let go of her wrist. Nami looked around. Yeah, they were already there. Nami didn't have time to notice before. Where are your friends? Nami asked for a second time, still catching her breath. Behind you, Luffy pointed and continued to laugh his goofy laugh. Who's that? A silly-looking boy asked, walking up next to Luffy. Nami made a sick face at the sight of him. Never had she seen anyone with a nose as long as his. Usopp, that's Nami, Luffy introduced. Nami tried not to laugh. Who would name their kid Usopp? Hello, gorgeous, a tall, blonde boy said, putting his hands on her shoulders from behind her. She looked over her shoulder to see another one of Luffy's friends. Then she tried not to laugh again. The way his eyebrow was curled was hilarious. Sanji, Luffy sighed and slouched a little. Beware, Zolo pulled Sanji away from Nami. He's a crazy woman. I'd watch your back. I will. Nami looked away and back at Luffy, who was also trying not to laugh. Trying being the key word. He was laughing so hard he almost lost balance and fell. What's so funny, punk? Sanji growled at Luffy, pushing Zolo away from him. Don't scare her. Luffy laughed harder. Zolo rolled his eyes. You're asking the impossible, Luffy. Sanji's always going to be scary. Zolo made a fake horrified look at Sanji. Why you? Sanji was about to attack Zolo, but was stopped by Usopp jumping in the middle of them. You guys need concealing, Usopp said, holding both of them back. Nami finally started laughing along with Luffy. His friends were weird, but funny in their own odd way. After a minute of holding Sanji and Zoro away from each other, Sanji and Zolo both broke free and attacked while Usopp crouched and covered his head. Help, Usopp shrieked, being in the middle of everything. This is stupid. Zolo scowled, then ran across the field and away from Sanji. Hey, get back here, Sanji yelled, running after Zolo. Cut it out, Usopp screamed, running after the two. Your friends don't get along very well, do they? Nami laughed. You'll get used to it. It's like a normal, everyday thing for us, Luffy told, as he stopped laughing. I almost feel sorry for you. Nami poked at him playfully. Yeah, well, I'm normally a part of it. Luffy sighed, as Nami poked fun at him. Well, I think I'm going back to my dorm building for a while. I'm kinda hungry. Where am I supposed to eat dinner? Nami asked, confused. You're supposed to bring your own food. Luffy scratched the back of his head and laughed. Oh. Nami thought for a bit and then checked her wallet. She had no money. I'll buy you dinner if you go into town with me for a while, Luffy suggested, seeing the distressed look on her face. Are you sure? Why not? Thanks. Nami smiled at him warmly. the least I can do. I can kinda be an annoying person sometimes. He smiled back, while shoving his hands in his pockets. You're not that annoying. Nami tried to avoid looking into his eyes. They were so sweet. She wanted to avoid the same moment that happened on her rooftop. Just thinking about it made her shake. Let's go, Luffy laughed, and ran. Wait up, Nami ran after him. Surprisingly, he was going at her speed. It was kinda fun racing him. She found herself laughing, as she tried to beat him to town. Maybe her day wasn't going to be a total waste of time after all. Maybe. A long while after the two had reached town, they were sitting in a simple restraint chowing down on dinner in Luffy's favorite restaurant, the Meat Hut. Obviously it was a fast food restaurant, and everything served well. Wasn't Nami's favorite thing to eat, but Luffy seemed to be enjoying it. She already knew he'd eat anything. As she gazed down at the messy and greasy food set in front of her a few minutes before, Luffy was already eating like a pig, a wild pig. But she was hungry, and he did pay for everything. It couldn't hurt to try taking a bite. But try was all Nami did. She couldn't get the food that close to her face. It just looked and smelled terrible. So she sat there, gazing down at her plate, as Luffy ate, and ate, and ate. She sighed. If she'd known this was coming she would have just gone home starving. Heek, if she was that hungry she could just go find Vivi, and beg for money. But no, she was stuck here, with the wild pig. Somehow, her gaze shifted from her messy plate to Luffy. She raised an eyebrow at him, as he continued to stuff his face like an idiot, as she sat and stared. Hasn't he ever heard of manners? But manners didn't matter in a fast food restaurant. It wasn't just Luffy. It was everyone. As she sat there uncomfortably, hoping maybe Luffy might catch her staring, and they could leave, a tall man had just randomly, and out of nowhere sat in the chair in the middle, or the two. Nami looked at him frightened for a moment, not expecting someone to just come up and sit there so randomly, and out of the blue. She stared at him with her eyes wide in shock. He looked at her funny, and waved. Howdy, he greeted me, as if it were an everyday thing. Nami made a face at him. Who are you? She questioned. Koza. Nice to meet you. He smiled widely, then frowned again, and turned his gaze to Luffy. Geez, do you have any manners at all? Luffy looked up at him suddenly, not knowing anyone, but Nami was there before. What? Oh, Koza, did you leave your brain at home again? Koza smirked, handing Luffy a napkin to wipe his face with. Luffy growled, as he took the napkin, and Nami giggled a little. She was thinking the same exact thing. Koza turned back to Nami, as she giggled, and smiled wide again. And who is this pretty little face you have oh so stupidly brought along with you? Nami blushed, and looked away at his comment. Pretty little face. The new nickname made her wanna barf, but was sweet all at the same time. That's Nami, Luffy smiled, then shoving another handful of food into his oversized mouth. Nami? Koza scratched the back of his head, and thought for a moment, and then his face suddenly filled with excitement, as he started pointing at Nami. Hey, you're that girl Vivi can't stop talking about. Nami laughed awkwardly, finding the whole event, for a lack of a better word, strange. Where is Vivi anyway? Luffy asked with a mouth full of food. Hey, use your manners, Koza scolded, then remembered to use his own manners, and lowered the finger that was pointing at Nami, as he laughed at himself. But just then Nami remembered her stomach, as it groaned for food. She looked back down at her plate, and made a sick face. She took a deep breath, and lifted her fork again. She had to be insane if she was going to eat this. But, you don't have to eat it, Koza laughed at her. Leave it to Luffy to take a girl to a disgusting restraint, and expect her to like it. Hey, Luffy looked up at Koza, as if she were offended, all at the same time swallowing his food. Here, Koza handed Nami a chocolate bar. He figured all girls would die for chocolate. Eat this. Thanks. Nami hungrily reached for the chocolate bar, and grabbed it out of his hand, scarfing it down like she was the hungriest person there ever was. Ever. Koza rubbed the back of his head, and laughed, as Luffy stared down at his officially empty plate. Then Koza got up. I'm leaving to go find Vivi, Luffy. Why don't you and Nami walk around for a while? Nami might have a chance of having a little fun out there. Okay. Luffy grinned from ear to ear, and laughed his goofy laugh. Thank you, God. Nami sighed in relief. 2 more seconds in that place, and she swore she'd end up barfing all day. It was that bad. A while later, they ended up taking a walk on the far end of the town, the end where the town ended a little before the cliff that overlooked the ocean. They strayed farther and farther from the town, and closer to the cliff, as their walk continued, as the sun just started to set. Thankfully, that side of the town was quiet, so Luffy and Nami could actually hear themselves talking. The middle of the town was so loud they couldn't even hear themselves think. Surprisingly, they were actually talking about something Nami was interested in. She found herself deep in their conversation, as they neared the cliff that overlooked the ocean. Really? Is that true? Nami looked at him quizzically. Yeah, Luffy laughed, and threw his hands in the air. It's true, she really did that. Nami gasped, and held her hand over her mouth. While I'll never look at my English teacher the same way. You never liked her in the first place. Luffy laughed, and pointed out. I never liked any of my English teachers. Nami laughed at her social skills along with Luffy. I don't like teaching periods. Luffy smiled triumphantly, as if it were some kind of accomplishment. Nami laughed at him. She couldn't see why he was so laid back and carefree all the time, but his attitude was, in a way, refreshing. She smiled sweetly at him, as he continued to smile ear to ear, only something he could do. As she gazed warmly at him, she couldn't help but started thinking about how cute he was again. How childish his hat looked, as it sat on top of his head, how his hair looks unbrushed, but somehow unnoticeable at first glance, or how cute his smile was. His grin was her favorite part about him. The goofy smile made her laugh. It almost always put her in a good mood. She was going to miss it when her mother and father decided it was time to run away again. Move. As they reached the cliff, the conversation ended. It seemed as though they talked about anything and everything. There was nothing more to talk about, or, at least nothing else they could remember. As they stopped talking, and stood on the cliff staring out at the sunset, both of them couldn't help but whisper, wow, the sunset was stunning. Its beauty was like nothing they'd ever seen before. The mixtures of orange, pink, yellow, and blue seemed to blend together so perfectly. After a while, Luffy thought it was funny, and laughed a little to himself, snapping Nami out of the trance she was in. The only thing he could think of that was more beautiful than the sunset was Nami, and for some reason he thought of it as funny instead of sweet. Nami looked at him suddenly, shocked at his sudden laughing outburst. What? She questioned. It's nothing, Luffy managed to say through his teeth, as he laughed continuously. Luffy was about to continue, and tell her what was so funny, but instead thought about it for a while. He blushed, and looked away from her, as she continued to stare. Are you okay? Nami asked, still a little bewildered. Luffy cleared his throat. I'm fine, he said simply. Nami rolled her eyes, and then continued to stare out into the horizon. The way the sky looked that night made Nami want to stay there forever. But sadly, it only lasted a while. Luffy and Nami had sat next to each other, as the sun was setting. As the minutes continued to fly by, Nami found herself getting tired. After a while, she couldn't even keep her head up. So she did the first thing that came to mind, which just happened to be resting her head on Luffy's shoulder. Why did she do this? She didn't have a clue. As Luffy stared in wonder at Nami's actions, he blushed deeply. Then he realized Nami had fallen asleep, which meant one thing. He'd be carrying her all the way back to the dorm buildings, and he didn't mind. He picked her up, and very happily carried her back. The way she looked while she was sleeping was so worth the extra pounds. It was beyond cute the way she smiled in her sleep. When he finally reached the dorm building, and entered Nami's room, he found Vivi had already been sleeping soundly. So he ignored her, and walked over to Nami's bed, and gently laid her down, and tucked her in. But the smile on her face seemed to call to him. He couldn't leave her, not yet. There was something he felt he wanted to do, but couldn't think of anything. He got on his knees next to her bed, and peeked over the side, so his head was just slightly hovering over hers. And it was still there, that sweet smile that wouldn't leave her face. As he stayed there for a good half an hour, just staring at her face, he wondered what she might be dreaming about that made her so happy. He was about to leave, feeling he was a little tired too, but still felt he forgot to do something. There was this feeling in the pit of his stomach that drove him crazy when he thought of her. And the worst part was, it didn't go away with food. It only went away when he was close to her. It was literally like her very being. And presence called for him, and he called back. He lowered his face closer to hers, until he could feel her soft breaths against his skin. He liked the extra warmth against his face. It was in a way, relaxing. It relaxed him to know what she was doing all day long, just to be near her. All his worries, and fears if he had any, just seemed to go away around her. It was like nothing he'd ever gone through before. As time passed, he lowered his face even closer until he could feel their noses touching. It seemed as though in that very moment her smile, her lips, called for him even more. It seemed like that so much he closed the space between his lips and hers. He kissed her lightly, but the sensation was extreme. He was put in such a trance, he didn't even think about what he was doing. He probably wouldn't even notice if Nami woke up then and there. But much to his dismay, he pulled away slowly, and examined her face one more time before leaving. He finally felt satisfied. He also felt like for the first time he had a secret to one he wasn't going to tell anyone, not even Nami. The thought of her reaction scared him, but he was still glad he kissed her. If he even knew what a kiss was. And where have you been? Zolo asked, as Luffy quietly tiptoed into the room. I just went out for a while, that's all, he said. It was just a night in the town. Beep beep beep. Luffy's alarm clock went off, causing him to wake up. He sat up in his bed, and rubbed his eyes, after turning off that annoying alarm clock of his. It was the same old thing every morning. It would wake him up when he was the most tired, and send him to school. School, that was another thing he hated. As if school wasn't already bad enough, they had to send piles, and piles, and piles of homework home with him. He was already in that stupid building for 6 hours of his day. He didn't need to bring school home with him. He'd normally fall asleep in the back of the class where the teachers never noticed him. And when they assigned homework, he never got any of it, because he refused to listen during class. This meant Zolo had to help him with his homework all day, which never got done anyway. But there was still one reason he had to show up at school, and that reason was her Nami. The thought of seeing her every day made him want to scream with excitement. Her smile made him smile, and sent him home every day with a grin the size of Mars plastered on his face. He still didn't know why, but she had the biggest effect on him than anyone else. He'd rather hang around her than go off and do his favorite things, which included eating and goofing around like an idiot. 2 things Luffy was known well for. He remembered last night almost perfectly: the conversations, the sunset, her smile, her lips. Well, actually, the thought of kissing her again frightened him. The sheer thought sent him into an emotional high. He hated that feeling in the pit of his stomach that wouldn't go away with food. He hated it. He slowly and lazily dragged himself out of bed and rummaged through his drawers for something to wear other than his pajamas that he already had on. He slowly found the pieces of his school uniform and put them on. His uniform was simple and was the exact same colors as Nami's uniform. Red, black, and white. Those were the colors of their uniforms, and also the school colors. As soon as he was dressed and ready to go, he grabbed his backpack and dashed off in the direction of school. He was late. Again, it took him so long to get ready for school it wasn't surprising to his classmates when he'd show up 5 minutes late to class. The class also wasn't surprised when he fell asleep in the back of the classroom, while the teacher crossed her arms and tapped her foot. Luffy was just being Luffy. Just as he reached school, the bell rang. He made it in time, for once. He strolled down the crowded hallways and made his way to math class. He opened the door and walked inside to see he was one of the first students to show up in class, and the teacher smiled proudly at him. Luffy smiled weakly and picked the seat in the very back of the classroom. It was his favorite spot. He quietly sat down and leaned back in his chair, waiting for school to start and class to begin. He played with his thumbs and looked out of the window next to his seat and gazed out over the football field. Football he tried out for that once failed, as usual. He kept forgetting the plays and goofed around more than he played. He still stopped by the school to watch the games every once in a while though. It was fun to watch, and it gave him a reason to scream like an idiot. Another thing he liked to do. As he continued gazing out at the field, he could hear footsteps coming his way. He suddenly turned his head to the person that was coming at him with a surprised and bewildered expression, but sighed in relief when he saw it was just Nami. "Good morning, Luffy," she waved, and then sat next to him, and neatly pulled out her notebook and set it on her desk. Luffy blinked. "Morning." She smiled sweetly at him, and then sat up straight as the bell rang, and everyone sat down at their desks as class began, and the teacher started her lecture. Luffy yawned and leaned back in his chair again, and folded his arms across his chest. He decided to listen a little today. After all, Nami was. He glanced next to him at her from time to time as class went on, and she usually caught him. When he'd look back at the teacher and pretend like he was never staring at her, she'd laughed a little and continued to pay attention to herself. She counted how many times she caught him staring throughout class just for fun. She counted 6 times. As soon as the bell rang, declaring the first period over, Nami grabbed her things and walked out of math class and down the flooded hallways with Luffy. "I hate math," she mumbled as they reached her locker, and she began to dial her combination, and Luffy stood next to her, leaning against the other lockers, as she grabbed her things for the second period. "I hate school altogether," Luffy said, getting a slight chuckle out of Nami, who just shut her locker. They continued to walk down the hallway together, talking until they reached Nami's first period class. Then Luffy waved her off. "Bye, see ya third period." Luffy waved goodbye and continued to walk down the same hall to his class. "Bye." Nami waved back before entering her class. It was science. Oh, how she hated science. It seemed that the only 3 classes she liked were social studies, her elective, and English. Despite her evil English teacher, she sighed deeply and took a seat in front of herself. Another reason to hate that class: she had no friends in it. She was by herself. The bell rang, and class began. Class went by painfully slow, as she leaned over on her desk with her elbow on the desk and her head rested on her hand, as she listened to the teacher go on and on about mass, density, volume, yada yada yada. She could already tell it'd be a long day. Later, during lunch, she was one of the first students in the cafeteria. She grabbed her lunch and sat at a random table in the back of the room by herself, as she watched other students pour in through the cafeteria doors. She would have walked to lunch with Luffy, but he had to stop by his locker, so she went without him. And God knows where Vivi and Robin were. She sighed to her lonely self as she began to eat slowly, and staring, and the people walking around the lunchroom, hoping she might see someone she knew. But she sighed in relief because she could see Luffy and Zolo heading towards her, and they sat next to her. Luffy sat by her side, and Zolo sat across from her, as they began to eat lunch themselves. "What's up?" Luffy asked before cramming his face full of food. Not much," Nami mumbled before Zolo caught her attention. "What are you going to do after school?" he asked. "Maybe Luffy might like to come." Luffy blushed, and Zolo laughed hysterically. Nami just rolled her eyes at the two boys, as Vivi and Robin sat next to them. "Hello everybody." Vivi and Robin both greeted each other. "Dining with the boys?" Vivi raised her eyebrow at Nami, as she sat on the other side of her. "Where were you?" Nami questioned, getting a laugh out of Robin. "She was with Koza." Robin snickered, as she continued to eat. "Koza?" Nami thought for a moment, then remembered the boy she saw while she was in town with Luffy. "Oh, him." She turned to face Vivi. "He said you talked a lot about me." "I sure did." Vivi smiled proudly. "How come you didn't introduce me to him before?" Nami asked, a bit confused, looking around the lunchroom thinking she might find him. "He goes to a different school." Zolo starts swallowing his food, but Vivi's dating him. "He stops by every once in a while to say hi." "What?" Nami gave Vivi a shocked expression. "Really? He's your boyfriend?" "Yep." Vivi smiled triumphantly. "I met him at the cafe he works at every day in town. You know, the one you met Luffy at." "I wish I had a boyfriend," Nami mumbled stupidly to herself. "You already have a boyfriend," Vivi laughed. "What? Who?" Nami asked, even more bewildered. They all laughed and pointed to Luffy. They both blushed and looked away from each other. "I'm not her boyfriend," Luffy balked. "Yeah, sure." Zolo rolled his eyes, and Luffy's furious expression. "Zolo," he mumbled angrily. Fine, he said, "I'll back off." Luffy crossed his arms. "You better," he whined. I think I'm full." Nami got up. "Bye." Then she retreated out of the cafeteria, and to the commons where she could just think for a while. "Wait, I'm coming!" Vivi ran after her with Robin. "Don't do that, Zolo," Luffy growled. "I said I'd back off already, leave me alone." Zolo rolled his eyes again. Still Luffy looked in the other direction, and watched Nami walk out of the doors to the cafeteria, and into the commons. "Why don't you just ask her out?" Zolo suggested. "You like her, don't you?" "Do not," Luffy argued. "Come on," Zolo started. "You're always staring at her, and walking her home. You were even out in town with her all day alone with her. Admit you like her. It's so obvious it's funny." "Fine," Luffy gave in. "I like her. So ask her out," Zolo repeated. "I don't have to." Luffy crossed his arms. "Come on," Zolo insisted. "No, yes, no, yes." There was a pause. "Fine," Luffy sighed, "but later." "Alright." Zolo patted him on the back before leaving. Luffy sighed. Easier said than done. He felt almost weak around her. How was he going to tell her he liked her? He didn't have a clue. At the end of the day, the bell rang, and everyone raced out of the school, and back home or out into town. Nami sighed, as she walked down the pathways of the park, and sat on one of the benches next to the giant fountain. She stared into the pouring waters, as she thought out the rest of the day. She spent the last of her money buying the newspaper in the morning, and had no money left to feed herself. She had to face it sometime. She needed a job. No matter how much she told herself she could just ask Vivi or Robin for money every day, it was obvious she needed a job. She searched through the newspapers she had bought before for jobs that were hiring. There was a job open at Luffy's favorite restaurant. No, there was another job opening at a gas station. Nah, another job opening was at the cafe Koza worked at. She thought it over for a bit, and decided it was time to go beg Vivi's boyfriend for a job. At least she'd be working with someone she knew. That made her feel a little better about the situation. A little. Koza sighed. Must he always be stuck at work? If he didn't spend every cent he had every time he was paid, he could be off having a good time with his friends right now. But no, he was stuck at this same stupid little cafe. Oh, what he would give to just quit, and always have $20 in his pockets. Life isn't fair, he continued to sigh, as he went through another set of dishes in the back of the building. He was stuck with the worst job today, dish duty. He was so underpaid. It'd be nice if he had someone to help him out a little. "Koza," one of the managers yelled through the door to the kitchen. "Yeah?" Koza moaned miserably, and turned to face the man in the black suit. "Someone wants you up front," the man sighed. "So go." Koza nodded, and dried off his hands with a washcloth, and headed out of the kitchen, and into the main room. "Koza, over here," he heard a feminine voice yell from the counter. He turned to face the shouting girl, and sighed in relief when he saw it was Nami. He thought it might have been Luffy again, coming to eat all the food. "Hey Nami." Koza stood at the other side of the counter in front of her. "Could you do me a favor?" she asked with pleading eyes. Koza leaned over on the counter with his elbow down, and his head rested into the palm of his hand, and his other arm was rested flat down. "Depends what that favor is." Nami took out this morning's newspaper from her school bag, and showed Koza the line in the jobs section that said, "Now hiring waiters at the cafe." Koza leaned in and examined the thick paper, a blank look of boredom on his face. "You know, you can just ask for a job yourself." Koza looked back across the counter at Nami, his head still resting in his hand lazily. Nami frowned. "On." Koza stood up straight again and turned the other way, irritation filling his features. All right. Why was it so damn hard to say no to pretty girls? Why? Nami smiled again. "Thanks a bunch, Koza." She took a seat and watched as Koza left the back room for one of the managers. She waited 5 minutes before Koza, and his blank expressions were back, and with a tall man in a casual black suit. The man confronted her and looked her up and down. "And you're Nami, right?" he questioned. Nami nodded her head nervously. "And you want a job here, am I correct?" Koza rolled his eyes and bent back into the kitchen to finish the dishes. He was so not in the mood to stand around and watch the people on a higher level than him be dumbasses. "Yes." Nami raised an eyebrow as Koza stormed out of the area. Vivi sure had a weird taste in men. "May I see your student ID?" the man asked. Nami nodded and pulled the card with her student ID on it that the school gave her. The man took it from her and skimmed over it quickly, then nodded and gave it back. "Would you mind coming to my office for a quick survey?" he questioned. And no, not at all. Nami joined him as he headed down one of the halls and into a small but fancy room with a neat desk in the middle. "Take a seat, please," the tall man instructed. Nami nodded and then took a seat across from him in front of the desk. "What is your age?" he asked. 16, Nami answered. "Where do you live?" he asked again. "In dorm building #D at Rouge Town Private Middle School," Nami answered again. "Is that close to here?" he continued to question. Nami sighed deeply. "This might take a while." -D, yes. Nami busted through the doors to the kitchen and showed the dish duty Koza her new job application. Oh joy. Koza rolled his eyes at her and continued to wash dishes. "Another person whom I must bow down to." Nami put her hands on her hips and made a face. "Ah, come on. You're just jealous that I get to work as a waiter, and you're stuck with dish duty." "I couldn't be any more obvious with you," he started. "I just don't enjoy working here." "Well, I have to if I ever want to eat," she pouted. "I'm always broke all the time." "Welcome to the club." Koza threw his soapy arms up into the air sarcastically. "Koza," one of the chiefs suddenly said, catching Koza so off guard he shrieked, and tripped over his own 2 feet, landing face first in the bubbly sink, causing all the clean dishes to come tumbling to the floor, each one breaking to bits as they hit the ground. "Oh geez," the chief slapped his forehead. "Oh." Nami put her hand over her mouth. "Ugh," Koza started, lifting his face out of the soapy water, and turned to face the chief. "What?" "I just came to tell you your shift was over, but I guess you'll just have to clean up this mess before you leave without pay." "Don't be so jumpy," the chief told, and then headed back in the other direction to join the other chiefs in cooking. Koza sighed miserably and dried his face with a dry towel, but when he attempted to grab the broom he tripped over his feet again and landed on his ass. "Why me?" Koza looked up at the ceiling, talking to the air. Nami walked over and held out a hand to him. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Koza rejected her offer and stood himself up on his own, followed by brushing of his work uniform. "Could I ask something?" Nami questioned nervously. She didn't want to piss him off even more. Koza looked away from her, trying to hide the overpowering anger that filled his eyes. "Yes?" He tried to sound casual. "When do I start working?" Nami took a few steps away from him, just in case. "Tomorrow." Koza sighed very deeply, calming himself a bit. "Go to one of the managers for your work uniform." Nami nodded and quickly retreated to the door, leaving Koza at peace so he could finish his job. Nami found the same manager in a black suit from before, and tapped him on the shoulder, causing him to face her. "Yes?" he asked. "Where do I get my work uniform?" she asked calmly. "It will be sent to your dorm later today. You start work tomorrow from the time your school gets out to 4:30 p.m., and I'll see you then." With that he continued walking in the direction he was headed in before, and left through a door on the right. Okay, Nami looked around the cafe. What to do now? She wandered through the cafe, looking at the coffee cups and whatnot that were for sale on the shelves. She tried to ignore the food though. She didn't want to be any hungrier than she already was. "Nami?" a female voice from behind her asked. Nami turned around to come face to face with Vivi. "What are you doing here?" Vivi asked. "Getting a job, and what are you doing here?" Nami questioned. Vivi's expression gave her the look that said, "Are you stupid?" as she tapped her foot, getting Koza of course. "He is my boyfriend, you know. Have you seen him around yet? He got stuck in the back cleaning up a mess. Nami informed me." "Oh," Vivi pouted. "I waited all day to see him, and he's stuck here. I'm so hungry." Nami changed the subject completely. What?" Vivi made a face as her sudden outburst. Nami took a seat at the nearest table with Vivi. "I'm dirt poor, and am starving." "Then get a job," Vivi suggested. Nami slapped her forehead, I just did. I start tomorrow. Alright, Vivi gave up. I'll buy you something while we're here waiting for Koza to hurry his ass up. Thank you? Nami repeated several times. It's no problem. Vivi waved at one of the waiters and ordered Nami a meal. The meal soon came, and Nami stuffed her face, but tried her hardest to keep up her manners. It wasn't ladylike to eat the way Luffy did. But damn, she didn't care. Her only thoughts were, I gotta eat something. Nami finished right, as Koza showed up from the back rooms with his messy uniform still on. Did I make you wait too long? He asked Vivi as he approached her from behind, and rested his hand on her shoulder. No, you came just in time. Vivi smiled sweetly at him, and then looked at Nami pleadingly, as if to ask, may I leave? Nami rolled her eyes and nodded, followed by Vivi's bright smile, and the two left, leaving Nami all alone. She sighed, and rested her head in the palm of her head, as the waiter took the empty dish off the table, and walked away. She was alone, for like, the 1000th time. She was starting to really wish she still lived in Cocoa Village with her stepsister. They did everything together. They did their hair together, ate together, went swimming together, walked to school together. I'm pretty sure you've got the picture. Nami yawned to herself, as she reminisced in her memories. Why oh why did they drag her away from that beautiful island? Oh, what she would give to go back there, even just to visit. Her sister was a lucky little brat to be old enough to choose to stay while Nami was dragged off forcefully by her parents yet again. She drew imaginary pictures on the table with her index finger, and she thought of all the things her sister and she did on that pleasant little island. But she was soon interrupted by the sound of sandals slapping on tile coming her way. She looked up, and there he was again, Luffy. It was insane how whenever she was feeling the loneliest he'd show up. Whether she wanted him to be or not, he was always right there in front of her, and she didn't want to admit it, but she really liked him, even if he was the darkest insane slob she'd ever met. He took the seat across from her. What's up, Nami? He asked, sounding anything but casual. Was he nervous? Nami felt as though she was going to burst out laughing when she looked up at him, and his hand shifted in the other direction, as he played with his thumbs. It was the first time she'd seen him worked up, but the question was, over what? Hello, Luffy, she greeted, trying her best not to laugh at him. Oh what? He snapped back into reality, and faced her. I said hi. Nami sighed. Yep, same old Luffy. Oh well, hi. He swallowed a bunch of air. What's wrong? She raised an eyebrow at his behavior. Nothing, he answered simply. Alright then. Nami rolled her eyes, and got up out of her chair. I have to go back to my dorm room. I have unfinished homework to do. She turned to walk off, but then looked over her shoulder at his blank expression, and waved him off with a smile. Bye. Luffy smiled faintly. Yeah bye. He slammed his head on the table, and sighed miserably against its surface. This was going to be impossible. His plan wasn't exactly going as planned. He didn't even know where to start with how hard this was going to be. It was confusing to him as to why he was so jumpy and worked up. On top of that, she was too damn smart. If he wasn't careful, she could have already figured it out. And shit, he had homework to do too. It was gonna be a long evening. What's up? Zolo questioned, as he watched Luffy storm into their dorm room furiously. This is too hard. Luffy sat down on his bed and folded his arms. Obviously, he was not happy with himself or any of this craziness for that matter. Did she say no? Zolo questioned, as he leaned back against the wall, eyeing his friend. No, she didn't even let me finish my sentence. Luffy crossed his arms and huffed furiously. Tough luck. Zolo rolled his eyes and walked towards the door. I have to go for a while. Zolo started, looking over his shoulder and back at Luffy before he left. I won't be back till late. I don't care, Luffy groaned, and fell back in his bed. Zolo sighed and left, slamming the door behind him. He had his own problems to deal with at the moment, and they included plumbing Sanji to a pulp. Luffy rested his hands behind his head, staring up at the ceiling, and deeply lost in thought. He was so deep in his thoughts he didn't realize that the hours were flying by like minutes. He still couldn't get his mind off her. It was like she owned and controlled him. It frustrated Luffy that he didn't know a thing about her, but still felt like he'd known her all his life. He tossed over in his bed, and began gazing out of the window. He watched as people passed by, walking down the sidewalks, and sitting by the fountain in couples. The sight sickened him. It pleased him all at the same time. Luffy wasn't exactly the romantic type. He turned over again, facing the door that stood between him and the hallway. He sighed, sitting up slowly, and hunched over, as he continued to stare. Maybe, just maybe if he thought about it hard enough, Nami would fly through the door, and admit her feelings for him, if she had any. But as he stared, it got darker, and darker outside until the stars were perfectly visible outside in the faded sky. It was obvious to him now that she wasn't coming. Damn, Luffy groaned, as he stood up and stretched, yawning loudly enough to wake up the people in the room next to him. He took a deep breath and walked out of the dorm door, and turned to face Nami's door, which was actually wide open. He leaned over the side and peeked inside to see Vivi sitting comfortably on the edge of her bed reading the same book she'd been reading for a while now. Luffy tried to stay hidden, but Vivi was too quick. She shifted her gaze from the book and onto him. "She's not here," she explained, and then continued reading. Luffy nodded, saddened a bit, and left up the stairs and into a big empty room with a few couches and a TV. It was pretty much Luffy's favorite spot to be when stuck in the building, but he seemed uninterested at the moment, and proceeded up the stairs again, and through the door that led to the roof. But when he opened the door and turned a corner, there she was again. He should have remembered, she liked to stargaze at night too. As he stared, Nami felt someone watching her, so she looked over her shoulder to see Luffy casually approaching her, and taking a seat next to her on the cold floor. "What's up?" Luffy asked, as he looked up at the sky, and Nami stared blankly for a moment. "Well, Nami stopped herself for a moment before she said anything stupid, and also looked up at the glittering sky. "I just have a lot on my mind." "Like what?" Luffy questioned, shifting his gaze from star to star, counting as he went. "Stuff," Nami answered simply, refusing to tell him a thing, as if he'd really care. "I see." Luffy closed his eyes and breathed in the sweet midnight air. "I do too." Nami let her legs hang over the edge of the building. "What are you thinking about?" Luffy opened his eyes again slowly, and opened his mouth to say it, but the words wouldn't come. He was going to tell her, he wanted to tell her that he was thinking about her, but just couldn't do it, so he lied. "School, I guess." Oh, Nami lifted her legs to her chest, and hugged them in an effort to warm herself in the cold breeze. "Hey Nami," Luffy started, itching himself a little closer to her, hoping she might not notice. "Yeah?" Nami asked, not even bothering to look at him. Her gaze was already fixed on the biggest star in the sky. "Do you ever count stars?" He swallowed. Nami laughed for a moment before a smile spread on her lips. She didn't need to show him she was smiling. She was sure he was watching. "Yeah, I do." Luffy smiled weakly back. "Really? 1 star for every emotion, 1 star for every event." Nami paused. 1 star for every special person. Luffy thought for a moment. "Remember earlier this evening? At the coffee shop?" "Yeah." Luffy sighed deeply. "I tried to tell you something, but you took off." "Sorry about that." Nami laughed at herself. "I was in a hurry." "Oh, what did you want to ask me?" Nami questioned. Normally, she wouldn't care. Past was past, right? But she couldn't help feeling curious. Luffy didn't know how to tell her. He stalled, as long as he could, but when Nami's gaze moved from the sky, and to him there was no stopping his actions, his hand reached out for the side of her face, and rested on her cheek. Although taken back a bit, Nami let him continue. His face inched towards hers, as she stared into his eyes blankly. "Well?" Nami asked, stopping his actions, and totally freezing him, as his lips were just hovering over hers. Luffy started again, not realizing that their foreheads were touching. He wasn't realizing how close his lips were. He wasn't realizing his fingers were slowly tilting her head. "I like you," he finally admitted before his lips met hers, and surprising as it was, she didn't pull back. In fact, she sighed gratefully against his mouth, and nearly fell into him, causing his other arm to wrap around her so she wouldn't bring him down with her. The kiss only lasted moments, but seemed to last like a lifetime, and much to Nami's dismay, he pulled away before she was finished. "I like you," he repeated. Nami laughed faintly. "Yeah, me too." Weeks had passed since then. In fact, it was already January in a matter of days. Christmas had just ended, and Luffy and Nami were as close as ever. She still considered him an idiot from time to time, but things seemed to be working out just fine. Nami managed to make friends with her English teacher somehow, the past 2 months, and Luffy managed to actually get his homework done for once, without help from Zolo. The school was planning a New Year's Eve party after school on Friday, in 2 days, and Vivi and Nami were currently off in town searching for dresses, leaving the boys back at the dorms to whatever the heck it is that they do. Luffy had already asked Nami to the dance, Koza asked Vivi to the dance, Sanji managed to get someone to go with him, and Zolo had already been asked 100 times by other girls, so he had nothing to worry about. Even Usopp found someone to go with. Why? A young lady named Kia. Everything seemed just perfect. There was no sign of Nami's parents wanting to move, for the time being, and she had more friends than ever. The thought of her parents moving again seemed impossible with her dad's new job. Life was just grand. "I like this one," Vivi squealed with joy, as she held up a long, blue, sparkling dress for Nami to see. "That's beautiful." Nami was delighted. "Do you think Koza will like it?" Vivi questioned. "Of course he will." Nami threw her hands up in the air to assure her best friend, and then continued to browse through the racks for her own dress for the dance. "Can you believe this place is so empty like this? We're, like, the only ones here," Vivi pointed out, getting Nami's attention, and they both examined the room. Nami raised an eyebrow. "Wow, you're right. Usually Rouge towns are flooded with people. This is so out of the ordinary." "Well, more for us." Vivi danced around merrily, and continued to admire her dress. Nami flipped through a few more dresses, a red one, a short black one, and another one that was too glittery for its own good. It seemed like Vivi got the only good one. We should check out another store. This one has nothing that I like. Nami frowned, quite flustered that they had already checked 10 different stores. Why not? Vivi shrugged. Just let me buy this one first, okay? Okay. Nami smiled, and waited by the clear doors, as Vivi purchased the dress. They soon left for the next dress store down the road, and entered the decorated doors. Whoa! Vivi admired all the dresses on display in the back of the room. Maybe you'll find one back there. Nami nodded, making her way quickly to the back of the room, and walked down the row of dresses, admiring each one until she came to the last one in the corner, and stared in awe. Vivi soon joined her. Look at that, Vivi admired, staring lovingly at the dress Nami had just grabbed. I want this one, Nami announced to the cashier who was close by. She soon bought the dress, and the two were out of the store, and back at the dorm rooms, purposely sneaking past the guys so they wouldn't see. They weren't planning on showing them till the dance in 2 days. They could wait. The next day was a half day, in order to give time to set up the dance for tomorrow. The last bell had rang, and Nami and Vivi were on their way to the coffee shop to say hello to Koza. Hey Nami! Luffy ran to them from behind. Nami smiled sweetly at him. Yes, Luffy? Mind if I tag along? Luffy asked, walking next to her, as they continued to walk into town. No, not at all, Nami said. Luffy smiled back, and Vivi rolled her eyes. Luffy grabbed her hand, and they continued on their way to the coffee shop where Vivi was sure Koza was waiting for them anxiously. They soon arrived, and sure enough, there Koza was. You took long enough. He greeted them in his usual I hate life tone. Vivi clung to his arm. Are you ready to go get lunch? She pressed. He shrugged. Why not? They walked across the street, and into a somewhat clean restraint, but it was better than staying at the coffee shop, or worse, Luffy's favorite restraint. They sat down at a table, and ordered some lunch. As they waited they talked about their day, and how they've been lately, the usual. You'll never guess what happened at the shop today, Koza said in between taking a drink of water. What? Vivi leaned over, and stared at him lovingly. Well, he started. My boss was coming to tell me to do the dishes again, but instead tripped over his own 2 feet, as he came at me, and ended up going home for the day. So one of the cooks did the dishes instead. You got lucky, Nami smirked at him. Vivi just continued to stare, making Koza somewhat uncomfortable. A while later Koza got up to leave, and took Vivi with him, claiming his lunch hour was over. So Nami and Luffy were left alone, and decided to take a walk for a while. When does your shift at the shop start? Luffy asked, hoping to strike up a conversation. In a half an hour, Nami sighed. She didn't want to think about work just yet. Oh, Luffy sighed with her. But Nami started. I don't work tomorrow, so we can stay at the dance, as long as we want. Luffy smiled faintly. That's good. He purposely hid the fact that he absolutely cannot dance with her. She'd find out sooner or later. Should we head back to the shop? Nami looked up at him, as they stopped. Luffy shrugged, and nodded slowly. So the two were off back to the shop, and it was time for Luffy to leave. Bye, Nami waved, as she entered the shop. Luffy sighed deeply, as he watched her disappear into the shop. He walked back to the dorm room by himself, and met Zolo there, who was currently talking on the phone with only God knows who. Luffy ignored him, and turned on the T.V, lounging back against the wall, as he watched a show. Even though he couldn't dance, he couldn't wait for tomorrow. Nami's job had stolen her from him way too many times, and tomorrow would be his chance to be alone with her. No Vivi, no Koza, no Zolo, no math teacher, you get the picture. It would be great. The big day was finally here. The New Year's dance was in a few hours, and even the most gloomy people were excited. It was one dance of the year that the teachers didn't plan. It was all up to the students, which was great, considering teachers used gay music and themes. When would they understand their students weren't born in the lame 80s? Most likely never. Figures. Anyhow, like I said, this dance was big, huge, gigantic, more so, and it just so happened Nami was part of the crew in setting this blowout up. Vivi, and Robin too, but much to Zolo's dismay, Nami had volunteered him so he was forced to help. Wonderful. He spent most of the time lounging around on the newly bought furniture for the dance while everyone worked though. He refused to do or lift anything. Nami helped others set up the table with refreshments while Vivi and Robin hugged the banner that read Welcome to the New Year's Dance Ion in front of the school building with balloons and confetti and such as decorations around the area both outside and inside. Zolo eventually was forced to help some of the other male students to hang a very large disco ball in the center of the clean and shining dance floor located in the middle of the large area they were going to throw the party in. Besides the scattered pieces of paper and cardboard on the floor, the place was starting to look pretty good. At the refreshments table Nami was whipping the table of any crumbs, and setting the long white table cover over the table so everything would stay looking neat, while the food was attacked with hungry teenagers later on in the evening. Soon after, the fireworks for midnight arrived, and Nami helped a few others carry them to the back room to store for later. Afterwards, Nami helped Vivi and Robin, who was struggling a bit, hung up the banner. And that wasn't all she did. She helped Solo finish hanging the disco ball, and she helped sweep the floors and shine the dance floor. All in all, she was a very busy girl. She didn't mind it though. She hardly ever had a chance to help out for once, and this was a way of proving herself to her classmates, even if it wasn't really needed, and they didn't really notice her hard work. A while before everything would be finished at last, Luffy stepped by and snuck in to say hi before Nami left to her dorm room to chance, and thankfully, he had caught her just before she left the building. She was standing right at the doors when he called her name. "Nami," he called out, hoping to catch her attention, which he did. She turned to face the direction the voice came from, and spotted Luffy heading towards her through the thick crowd. "Luffy, you'll get in trouble if they catch you here early," she warned him, and he stopped in front of her. "Here, let's talk outside so you don't get kicked out when the party actually starts." She then grabbed his arm, and led him outside, somewhat near the fountain, and stopped there, and turned to face him. He scratched the back of his head, a bit embarrassed. "Sorry." "It's okay," Nami started. "Was there something you wanted?" "Yeah." Luffy slightly pointed his pointer finger into the air, signaling he remembered what he was going to say. "I was just coming to see if you were okay. You disappeared after yesterday." He sighed, and scratched the back of his head again, a little worried I guess. Nami smiled sweetly at him. "I've just been busy, you know that." "Yeah." Luffy seemed nervous. "I wanted to see you, and HM?" Nami questioned, as he choked on his words. It's stupid." He ignored what he was going to say, and looked away from her, a light shade of pink on his cheeks, feeling even more embarrassed. Nami laughed at him. "Is it okay if we continue this later? I've only got a few hours left to get ready for the dance, and Vivi's probably already back in the room waiting for me." "Yeah." Luffy looked at her again, and smiled weakly, looking like most of a poor smirk that read "I give up." She smiled, caught him off guard by kissing him on the cheek, giggled, and ran away. Watching her leave, Luffy held the side of his face where she kissed him, and just blushed a very, very dark red, so much so he resembled a big fat cherry. It was cute. He shook his head, as soon as he was finished watching her disappear to rid himself of all thoughts, and stuffed his hands in his pockets, taking a deep breath, and looking up at the sky. Girls were weird. "Where were you?" Vivi fussed, as Nami entered the room, smiling, and all. "Luffy wanted to talk to me," Nami informed simply, not paying much attention to her worked-up friend. She walked over to her bed, set her things on the mattress, and began browsing through her dresser for the dress she'd bought earlier. "Oh," Vivi nodded, suddenly understanding. "What did he want?" SJE did the same thing Nami did, find her dress, and brush it off, making sure everything was in tip-top shape. "I don't know," Nami started. "I didn't give him time to finish." Nami then took her dress, and hauled it over to the bathroom, where she shut the door behind her so she could get dressed alone. Why not?" Vivi continued to talk, hoping Nami heard her through the shut door. "Because," Nami answered after a few seconds of hesitation, "I wanted to make it here with enough time to freshen up." "I see." Vivi began to put on her dress, as well, after shutting the window, and pulling over the "Want anyone seeing?" "Nope." After about 15 minutes, both girls had managed to fit the tight dresses over there. While Vivi admired her dress in the tall mirror next to her bed, spinning around, and laughing, Nami did her makeup, and did her hair, making sure everything was perfect. Utterly and truly perfect. If this night turned out wrong for any reason whatsoever, someone was going to die, most likely the first poor person she could get a hold of. Nami had a, for lack of a better word, violent side. "I'm so pretty." Vivi admired herself in the dress, still spinning around, and dancing about the room. "I can't wait till tonight. Cole's gonna drool." Nami rolled her eyes, and continued working on her hair, and makeup. "Yes." At the same time, "Nami, get out of the bathroom. I want to see what you look like," Vivi begged. "Come on, I really do. Please, please, please." "Alright, okay." Nami interrupted her before she could be any further. "I'm coming. Just hold on a few more minutes so I can finish up." Vivi huffed, and sat on her bed impatiently. After a few minutes, Nami emerged from the bathroom in her long, slim, sparkling red dress, and turned in a full circle so Vivi could see all sides. "Wow!" Vivi shot up, playing with Nami's curled hair, and gasping in awe at her dress. "You look great." "Well," Nami laughed, "I will try. Come on, the dance starts any minute." Vivi began to push Nami out of the door. "Let's go." Vivi huffed, and sat on her bed impatiently. After a few minutes, Nami emerged from the bathroom in her long, slim, sparkling red dress, and turned in a full circle so Vivi could see all sides. "Wow!" Vivi shot up, playing with Nami's curled hair, and gasping in awe at her dress. "You look great." "Well," Nami laughed, "I will try. Come on, The dance starts any minute. Vivi began to push Nami out of the door. Let's go. The two girls arrived at the dance, just in time. And by just in time I mean 2 minutes late. Better late than never. They were still let in after they gave the people at the front door of the school their tickets. Nami never really understood why they needed to pay to go to their own school dance, the one she helped those last teachers set up. The whole thing seemed stupid, but she was bent on having a good time. More so, she'd even thought up a list of things that she wanted to do until she'd leave back for her parents' home for the remainder of the weekend. Her parents had called the night before, and invited her to stay the night. Not something they'd usually do, but whatever. Vivi immediately found Koza, and they were dancing, as of right now, which was weird to Nami, considering Koza didn't even go to their school. But Vivi was happy, so Nami was too. Her friends were more important. Nami, while she waited, drank a cup of punch, and sat on one of the chairs at a table on the north side of the room next to the decorated wall. She sat, and watched, waiting for Luffy, who was probably late. Nothing new. For some odd reason she was disappointed. Not that Luffy was late, she could care less about that. What she was disappointed about was that the dance was nothing like she'd imagined it to be. It was even poorer than what she'd imagined it to be before she changed her mind, and actually showed up. She didn't even plan on going in the first place till Vivi dragged her into doing volunteer work to help set the whole thing up, which she'd worked very hard on, she might add. But it didn't matter, she was already there. It wasn't like she could grab her things and head all the way back to the dorms to pack up her dress, and whatever else she'd bought for the dance, and return everything to get her money back. Although, it would be nice if she had some kind of device to rewind time. That would make life a little easier. It might make her a little lazier, and carefree, but life would be easier. But such luxuries didn't exist, at least, not yet. She liked the idea though. Finally, after a half hour, Luffy appeared to be coming towards her in a tux with a bouquet of roses. Nami could not hold in a giggle. Luffy looked quite uncomfortable in a tux. At least she wasn't the only one that didn't like what she was wearing. Luffy said after he gave the roses to Nami, and sat down next to her, "You look great. I like your sarcasm." Nami laughed, covering her mouth a little with her gloved hand. "I'm not joking." Luffy gave her a look, and then let his features soften, as he began to laugh too. "Really, you look amazing. I mean it." "Well, I'm definitely not comfortable." Nami was honest, glad that she was honest, but guilty that she wouldn't just accept his compliment. She was not pretty. At least, not in her book, not by her standards, or anyone outside of her friend zone. "I'm sorry." Luffy apologized. "What are you apologizing for?" Nami gave him a look. "Don't be sorry. It's my fault. I mean, I'm the one who decided to buy the most uncomfortable dress in the whole store." Luffy smiled at her, said nothing, and then asked for her hand. "You, wanna dance?" "Not really." That's what she wanted to say, but how could she say no to Luffy? Look at his face. Nami tried not to look amused by his embarrassment. "I'd love to." Luffy's face immediately lit up, despite the 7 different shades of pink on his cheeks. "Really?" Nami let him take her hand, and lead her onto the dance floor. "Yes, really." For a while they danced, and occasionally they'd take a break to get a drink, or something to eat before they'd continue dancing. Surprisingly, Nami found herself enjoying every bit of what was left of the dance. But she wondered what she was enjoying most, the dance or Luffy's attention. He was trying so hard to be more sweet than goofy. Really, she could tell. She read her partner like a book. Luffy was enjoying the evening too, but he enjoyed everything. There wasn't one thing that he didn't find beauty or interest in. Everything in his world was amazing. What he found the most amazing, though, was Nami. Before she'd shown up, there was always something missing, something that he didn't already have. It really frustrated him that he didn't know what it was. But then, there was Nami. When he was near her, the emptiness was filled. When they were apart, the emptiness came back. A few months later, and look at them, not the ideal couple, but it was good enough. The dance was over way too quickly. Well, the dancing part. Everyone in the room was moved outside at about 11 p.m. Nami was surprised she stayed so long, and the fireworks were let off in an explosion of sparks and color for at least 2 hours before the dance was over. Luffy managed to gather up enough courage to hold Nami's hand while they walked back to the dorm rooms. Lucky him that he had the room next to hers. It gave him more time to stall before he had to say goodbye for the night, you could say. They stopped in between their 2 rooms, stayed silent for a moment, and then both started talking at the same time. Luffy, Nami. They both stopped to laugh before giving each other a hug goodbye. "I had a great time," Nami said. "Thank you, Luffy." And once again, all the shades of red poured onto Luffy's cheeks, and he felt himself blushing deeply. It was astonishing that she could make him do such a thing. He was almost surprised with himself. "Luffy? Oh yeah, sorry, me too." Luffy laughed in an awkward kind of tone. He mentally slapped himself for being an idiot. "Well, bye." Nami unwillingly let him go, and reached for her doorknob slowly, in case there might have been something else he wanted to say. But on the other hand, she had to hurry. She'd yet to pack an overnight bag to her parents' house. They'd be upset with her that she purposely was late. Luffy had reached for the door, his doorknob too, but stopped at the very last second. Wait, he called before Nami walked into her room. Before Nami could respond, Luffy cupped both of her cheeks and kissed her for a short moment, too short, and then retreated to his room, and shut the door before Nami could say anything either. After pausing a second to process through her mind what had just happened, exactly, and in detail, she giggled softly, and packed her bags, and left for the late-night bus to her parents' house. You're late, Nami's mother scolded. Late. I'm sorry, Nami apologized, sitting on the couch watching her mother storm back and forth across the room. Do you realize how worried I am? Nami's mother scorned further. You're 16, handle yourself. Mom, Nami had had enough. I get it, you're mad. Nami's mother sighed, trying to calm herself, and forced a smile in Nami's direction. Come on, Nami, you can explain to me what you've been doing over some coffee. With that, Nami was dragged into the kitchen, and she waited at the table until Nami's mother sat across from her with 2 cups of coffee. So, Nami's mother began, what have you been up to? Studying, working, going to school, Nami sighed, the usual. Nothing new or remotely interesting? Nami's mother asked. Oh, there's one thing. I'm dating a boy named Luffy. Nami was totally comfortable telling her mom. She wasn't the type to get embarrassed over these things. Nami's mother cooed, but Nami could tell that there was a hint of guilt in her voice. For whatever reason, you like him. Of course, if I didn't I wouldn't bother even talking to him. Nami's mother seemed even more guilty looking at her comment. Nami began to worry. Well, Nami's mother sighed. I guess it's time for me to explain now. This may take a while. Oh no, Nami held back tears. No, Nami, your father's already. I don't care, Nami cried. I'm not leaving, not again. I know it's a little hard, but Nami's mother paused. Okay, really hard. But this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Your father's been offered $500,000 a year to work elsewhere. Why can't you be happy for him? You'll make new friends. You say that every time, Nami complained. I don't care what you say, I'm not leaving. I'm tired of it. Well, it's not like I can just leave you here. Nami's mother became frustrated. Why not? I already live at the school anyways, and Grandma lives here too. There's no reason that I can't stay. Yes, there is. You're my daughter, and you'll obey me. We're leaving tomorrow. And with that, Nami's mother left the room with Nami still sitting there, speechless. Thoughts of running away, and countless other things, and emotions ran through her mind quickly, making her burst into tears when she thought about her new friends, and Luffy, and everyone else that her parents were making her leave behind. All the memories and good times. She knew she shouldn't have gotten into a serious relationship with anybody, and that she should have just focused on school, and nothing else. She just can't do it. Things always turned out like this. Was she cursed or something? Was she that unlucky? She cried for hours on end until she was failing to stay awake, and she slept there at the table until about 8 a.m. when she took her things, and headed back down to her dorm building without speaking a word to her mother or father who watched her leave. At the moment, she hated them with a passion. She didn't even want to look at them. As soon as she got back to her dorm building, and got out of the car, she stood there in front of the double glass doors, and looked up at the whole building, letting a few hot, salty tears run down her face before she wiped them away, took a deep breath, and proceeded into the building, and up the stairs to the floor her room was on. When she reached her dorm, she unlocked the door, and walked in, leaving the door open behind her. Vivi was gone. As always, figures. She began to tear everything out of the dresser next to her bed, and throw everything onto her bed, including everything on shelves like pictures, and her purse with her phone. ECT. She didn't care anymore. She just wanted to get out without running into anyone or having to explain anything. And she felt so guilty that she just gave up. That was it. There was nothing she could do. Absolutely nada. After her bags were packed and ready to go, she hauled them back outside to her car, and loaded them into the trunk, then hopped back into her car, and started to drive down towards the busier part of town where her job was. Once there, she parked her car outside, and put on a pair of sunglasses so she could be as emotionless as possible. The last thing she needed to do was break down in the middle of the coffee shop. Anything but that was needed. As soon as she walked in, Koza walked up to her, and smiled. She felt a stab right in the pit of her stomach when he greeted her. Nami, he waved, grinning. You're early, what's up? I'm quitting, Nami said in a monotone, and walked right past him without saying anything else. Hey Nami, wait, Koza sprinted after her. Are you okay? I'm fine, Koza. Nami managed to maintain her tone. Just fine. Really? Koza smirked, and reached for her sunglasses, but Nami slapped his hand away. Koza, she snapped. She sighed when Koza gave her a look, and frowned. I'm sorry, she said. It's okay. It's just kinda sudden, you know. Suddenly you're here, and quitting your job, the one you've worked hard at. Oh, Nami fought tears. She realized more and more how much she'd miss everything by the second. Hey, could you explain a little later? I've got a job to get back to. Okay, Nami lied. Thanks. Koza smiled before running off in the direction of the kitchen. I hope you feel better soon. Nami forced a smile, and then asked the manager if she could talk to her boss. The manager nodded, and led her to the boss's office where she sat down across from his desk quietly until the manager left the room. Yes, Nami? Her boss asked. It's been amazing working here, Nami started, but I have to quit. Some things have come up. I'm sorry. Okay. Wait, Nami froze, that's it? Yup, her boss smiled at her. That's it. Thanks for stopping by. Nami sighed gratefully, and then left the room immediately. When she began to drive back down past the dorm and the school's park, she began to cry again. She cried so hard that her makeup drizzled down her face, and her vision was blurry enough to make her pull over on the side of the road because she couldn't see where she was going. How hard was it to drive a few miles to the airport? Obviously, it was too much. When she wiped her tears away, hoping she could make it all the way this time, she started the car up again. But just as she was about to drive away, a pounding on her window, and a familiar voice stopped her. Nami! Nami! It called. Nami rolled down her window to greet Luffy. What? She mumbled. I found the note, Luffy said, referring to the note she'd taped to her door that read, I moved. Sorry my parents are so lame. I'm probably at the airport right now, if you're reading this. Again, sorry. I'm happy I got to meet everyone. Why are you moving? Luffy seemed just as upset as she was. The way she spoke made it seem like he was on the verge of crying too. You can't move. I don't have a choice, Nami said, avoiding his give and staring down at the car wheel. Why not? Luffy shook her shoulder, trying to get her full attention back. I just don't. My father got offered a job and... Don't go, Luffy yelled, and then his tone lowered to a whisper. Don't go. Nami didn't say anything. She just sat there quietly. What was there to say? For a while, they both just stayed there, and even Luffy began to cry, realizing there was no way to make it to where Nami didn't have to leave, and for lack of a better word it sucked. At least, Luffy sniffed. At least let me say goodbye. I don't have the time. I'll miss my plane. It became more and more painful for Nami by the second. She almost couldn't stand it anymore. But, you know what? Nami looked at him. If I keep crying I'll get into a car crash. Could you, by chance, drive me to the airport? Luffy looked at her. Why would I drive you to the airport if you're just going to leave him? Please. Nami smiled for him. A real, true smile. He gave in. Alright. Nami got out of the car, gave Luffy an earned hug, and went to the other side of the car while he got in the driver's seat. The whole ride to the airport was totally silent until they pulled into the parking lot, and Luffy stopped the car, turned to Nami, and sighed. You're here. Thank you, Nami said under her breath. Luffy nodded, and helped her out of her car, and walked her all the way inside the building. He stopped when they reached the main area, and shoved his hands into his pockets, trying to smile one last time at his girlfriend. Well, he whispered, I guess this is goodbye then. Yeah, Nami sighed. Luffy leaned over to kiss her on the cheek, and then turned away without saying anything else, and began to walk away. Nami watched him for a second, and then turned away herself to find her mom, who was probably getting impatient and worried by now. She wouldn't be happy with her, not one bit. When she found her mother, who didn't look guilty at all, she frowned, and sighed. I'm ready to go. She didn't even bother to look at her mother. Where do you go? Nami suddenly looked up at her. What? Your father left by himself, Nami's mother said. He'll be back in a few years, but he wanted you to stay so. Nami instantly dropped all of her bags, and freaked out. Thank you, thank you, thank you, she screamed before she darted off to the exit, and into the parking lot, finding Luffy who was already across the street, and on his way home, his arms swaying by his side, and his face hanging low, looking like his heart had just been ripped out of his chest, and shredded up before being thrown into a building pot of oil. Luffy, she shrieked, getting instant attention. She ran at him so fast that she swore there was a trail of fire behind her feet. She was spayed. Luffy, she called again, as soon as she reached him, literally throwing herself into his arms. Oh, Luffy! Luffy embraced her back, nuzzling his head into the side of her neck. The affection was well welcomed. What happened? I'm not moving, she cried of happiness. I'm not moving. Really? Luffy's face lit up. Yes. Nami looked up at him, giving him the most jaw-dropping, eye-popping, blood-stopping smile the world had ever seen. And that way just about all he needed before he kissed the crap out of her. He couldn't believe it. Life couldn't seem any more perfect. Who'd have thought the situation would flip upside down in 5 minutes? And right there, in the middle of the road, they shared a moment like no other. It was only the beginning of a long, happy rest of their lives. Nothing could be more perfect, as they walked down the street back to their rooms hand in hand. Nothing. The end. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.